today. Yes, thank you, Katie or Patrick, whoever pressed. We are recording the meeting. And since we're like a super small group, I would love it if we just did a quick round of introductions, because I think it's friendly and it seems like a good way to start off the month. So I've already introduced myself. I'm gonna toss it to Katie.
Thanks, Jen. I'm Katie Boyd. I work for the Cooperative Institute for Research in Environmental Sciences, which is one of the NOAA cooperative institutes that's located at the University of Colorado. I work in their education and outreach group, doing some research and evaluation on educational projects, and then managing the CLEAN project is another big part of what I do there. So I am the manager for CLEAN, trying to, especially on the CLEAN core side, keep track of our collection and support and resources and things like that, and then help a little on the CLEAN network side as well. So I'm happy to be here and happy to have a nice informal discussion with everyone today. And then Jed, do you want me to pass it to someone else?
Yes, if you don't mind. I see, thanks, Frank and Deb just joined. We're doing a round of intros, and then we're gonna do announcements after that.
Cool, so I'm gonna pass it to Tiffany, because that's who I saw in the room first when I came in.
Hi everyone, my name's Tiffany Boyd, and I have a group here out of Louisville / Boulder County in Colorado, Classrooms for Climate Action. And we are navigating, changing our support for teachers in the middle of this online space. We just got word this week that we have an exciting project where a school that is 100% online, we're helping them with a climate all school family STEM project. So we're kind of excited about that. We don't know what it's going to look like, but Jim Callahan is helping me brainstorm, and we're kind of having some nice cross collaboration. So it's nice to see everyone today. And I will pass it over to Patrick.
Cool. All right. So yeah, I'm Patrick Chandler. I'm the coordinator for the CLEAN Network. So I help arrange our speakers. And by the way, we are still looking for some folks for later in the fall. So if you know some people who would like to jump into those spots, please let me know or have them contact me. And I am also a fourth-year PhD student at the University of Colorado, focusing on creating guidelines for arch science partnerships that spur community action on environmental issues. Okay. I think I will pass to Eric.
Sorry, I'm muting. My name is Eric Havel. I'm an environmental educator. I worked for about 22 years at the Chabot Space and Science Center in Oakland, doing all kinds of environmental work, mainly focused on climate change education, environmental literacy building. But due to COVID, as many museums had to do, there was a huge round of layoffs, and so I was affected by that. So the last 6 months, I've pivoted to sort of a full-time caregiver for my 99-year-old grandfather, and doing some environmental consulting work for a group called the Community Resources for Science. And they're really focused on environmental literacy building, climate change. So we have a whole suite of environmental education programs we're rolling out for the fall, including a big, like a teacher open house for the beginning of the year with a couple keynote speakers, and a virtual resource fair that we're going to be offering this Saturday, actually, which you're all welcome to come to. And then it'll be followed by a suite of workshops, climate change and energy and eco-literacy workshops that'll be hour-long workshops that'll happen throughout the fall. And then we're culminating with developing these professional learning communities. So I'm really excited about the CLEAN network, because I think there's a lot of overlap with what CLEAN is doing and what 10 Strands is doing for teachers. And so kind of looking to build some bridges between the CRS effort, which is very much like Bay Area centric and sort of on the ground, with some of the larger efforts that are happening statewide. And then I just finished the Climate Reality Project training, the virtual one that was in July, and it was awesome. And I'm developing out a project that's going to try and connect all the Mediterranean climate zones in the world and sort of start to hold a discussion. And it'll be part of the presentations that I do for CRP initially, just to kind of get the dialogue going and make some comparisons between the wildfires in California, the wildfires in Australia, the mega drought that they have in Santiago, Chile, Day Zero, Cape Town, South Africa. So these are all similar climate zones undergoing climate change right now. So I'm really fascinated by the idea of learning from each other, building a community, and ultimately maybe telling on the ground stories from different diverse communities in the various populations. So Oakland, what's happening in the Latino community in Oakland, or what's happening with people of color in South Africa with respect to, you know, water scarcity, food scarcity, and some of the things that they're grappling with in terms of equity, but also with that climate change lens. And sort of the last piece of it would be zooming out and using some of the NOAA and NASA resources to, like the remote sensing stuff, to look at what's happening globally, what's happening with climate now, why are these things happening, what's the anticipated change in the next 10 to 50 years, and how do folks on the ground prepare for that?
Thanks, Eric. It's great to have you on the call.
Yeah,
and it's nice to see you again after all these years.
Yeah, likewise. I always enjoy catching up at Aztec with you.
I know.
Right. And Jim, too, was a longtime colleague at Chabot, volunteer. So I will pass it over to Jim Callahan.
Great. Hey, thanks. And that's perfect, Eric. Actually, let me give you kudos to you. I have had the honor to work with Eric for those 22 years. And Eric was instrumental in making it possible for us volunteers to start at Chabot to be one of the first science centers in the country to really take on climate change in a big way, and not just exhibits, but many different things. It's also at Chabot that I learned, and it's been a characteristic of how to have adults and young people work together in a very strong way. And Eric was very supportive of that, the Galaxy Explorer program. So we'll get you back on the payroll on things, Eric, but it's really great to have you on Clean on a regular basis right now. So if I could be, I got a little bit late, so I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but something to raise, and this was specifically for you, Jen, but I think others would be interested too. Is there anything is this out of line to say any way of having like climate summits, youth summits during the period of COVID? I mean, they wouldn't be 300 kids or something, but some kind of an idea of that. There's the way to connect internationally that we normally can't. I'm glad to work on it on the West Coast side and the Washington Coast side. Anyway, just raising that idea. Your work has been so important on summits, how to not have that just go into, or maybe I've got it wrong, but how to not just have that go into hibernation when we can't meet together. Anyway.
Thanks, Jim. I have lots to say on that. I'm going to hold that if we can hold it. We're just right now, because we're a small group and doing informal today, informal discussion, and I can certainly share out what's happening in the summit world right now, which is actually pretty exciting. Doing a round of introductions, then announcements. So if we could just kind of keep that in line, and then we can certainly come back to this as a topic if other folks are interested. But Jim, do you want to pass it to someone else on the call, or I can call on someone to introduce themselves?
Has Wendy spoken, or Deb, or Frank?
No,
either of
no.
Frank. So how about Wendy? Is that all right? It could be, or Deb. Do you want?
Oh, I'm happy to go, and I'll pass to Deb. So hi, Wendy Abshire. I'm a meteorologist by training. I'm the director of the American Meteorological Society's education program, normally located in Washington, D.C., but in COVID life, we're nationwide. Joining you today from Colorado. Backdrop appropriate for our changing weather as it is snowing and blowing outside right now, which is a nice change from the ash and fire of the weekend and the record heat. My program is a K-13 program supporting K-12 teacher professional development in weather, ocean, and climate science. And we offer 5 different courses for that with support of our sponsors. And we also leverage that same curriculum to then extend learning into undergraduate introductory courses, especially for non-science majors who want to learn more about weather, ocean, or climate science. So that's us right now in a nutshell. And I'm also a member of the Clean Board, which is my distinct pleasure. And I'm happy to be here today, and I will pass to Deb.
Thanks, Wendy. I'm Deb Morrison. I am with the Institute of Science and Math Education at the University of Washington, and am on the Clean Board as well. I work across sort of, sometimes I wonder what my job description is, but I think my job description is something like fostering systems change work in all different scales of systems to really think about what justice and equity are on the ground inside educational and learning environments. My focus is on environmental and climate literacy, because that's what brought me into education in the first place. I'm an ecologist by training. And so really thinking deeply about what does learning look like? How do we support it at all different levels? So learning for policymakers, learning for, higher education folks, that kind of stuff. And all the way down to like, what do we want learning to look like? So not just transmission, but actually like constructed, thoughtful learning from what we know. And inside the climate sort of space, I am most interested in how do we motivate learning for action. I don't actually care just to learn for learning's sake in this particular situation. I want learning for action. So how do we move people to better ways of living and being in line with our sustainable needs? Yeah, so that's me. And the actual work of what that looks like is many different things. Lots of meetings and talking to people and resource creation and shifting and nudging in all different ways. But I just really love this team of people. So I'm gonna, I think, over to Frank N.
Hey guys. So it's lovely to be with you all. Although Wendy, I'm struck with what is going on in your atmosphere right now, the last couple of weeks and today. So I'm here. I'm Frank Neipold in the NOAA Climate Program Office. I was given the charge to make the nation climate literate back in 2005, and I'm still working on it. But it is definitely a shared mission. There's no way around it. That was the first approach we took. And so we're still on it. It's not a quick process, but through the partnerships and collaborations, through the Clean Network and other associated relationships, we're making a hell of a lot of progress, but we got a lot more to do. I think one thing that I'm really excited about recently in my work is the work we're doing on the US ACE National Strategy. It opens up some new dimensions of our work. Like Deb, you were describing, it's this, and it's this, and it's this, and it's this, things you wouldn't naturally think are related to each other, but they are. So anyway, I think that we're on the cusp of a very important effort, and CLEAN becomes basically 10 in November. And so we begin thinking about what's the next 10 years of work for CLEAN, but that lines up beautifully with the work we're doing in the USA strategy development, which is, what do we see for by 2030? So I'll stop there. Let me see who else is on here.
Got Amy, and we have Frank.
Let's go Amy. Let's go Amy.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Sorry that I came in a little bit late. I'm the K-12 program manager at 10 Strands, and we're a public-private partnership that works mainly through the California Environmental Literacy Initiative to implement our state's frameworks and standards that explicitly call out climate change as well as environmental justice as topics that our K-12 students are supposed to understand. And I guess the only news from our end is that we have had a really nice response to a webinar series that we are launching, really aimed at a different group, which is administrators and leaders, as opposed to just teachers, to understand how environmental literacy is part of education in all of the subjects and not just some weird science thing that you might or might not do. And I'm with Deb. What's on my mind most, especially as our state boils and burns, is just how to get this out of the hypothetical and into action as quickly as possible, because I don't think we have any time to wait. That's all. I pass it to, I came in late, so I'm not sure who hasn't gone yet, so sorry.
I think it's just Frank Granshaw who has not introduced themselves yet.
Well, that's the last but not least. The last but not least, Frank.
Hope you're muted, Frank.
Okay, hopefully that'll work. So I'm Frank Granshaw from Portland, Oregon, the town that is supposedly smoking ruins overrun by anarchists. Don't believe it for a moment, folks. But I am a glacial geologist by training, and officially I'm a retired community college geoscience teacher. Unofficially, I teach climate science for non-science majors at Portland State. Done quite a bit of, have been quite active in developing that course over the past 6 years now. Also involved with a group called Greater Portland Sustainability Education Network, which is a United Nations University recognized regional center for expertise in sustainability education. And the primary project I'm involved with folks in doing there, it has been trying to organize a series of virtual bridges to the UNFCCC events. We did one last, what was that? That was last December, virtual bridge to COP25. We're now looking, we've got about five other places around the globe that are interested in doing parallel efforts, and we're looking at moving that a little bit further forward. So I've been in contact with folks from People's COP as well as the COP26 coalition. Otherwise than that, I'm also an advisory board member on a creation justice program through Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, looking at science from, looking at the issues of climate from another perspective, which is the religious one. So I think that's enough for me.
Great, thanks, Frank. Let's see, did everybody introduce themselves? Did we miss anybody? No, great. So thank you for taking the time to introduce yourself, and I love, I know we get together every week, but we always love new faces and new people joining, and it's so great to hear new projects and just welcome everyone into our community. Announcements. Patrick.
All right, so I just wanted to throw this out there. It's a messy link, but it's a link to a webinar that I was on with Wendy last week, where she was the keynote speaker and did a wonderful job. We're focused on equity in STEM. And we're looking at 3 different types of curriculum and tools that opened that up a bit in the classroom. So check that out if you'd like.
Oh, thanks, Patrick. And you guys included a great overview of SHINE and got everybody inspired by STEAM and performance arts as a meaningful way of communicating climate science and climate challenges. And so, yeah, that was a great webinar. It was a pleasure to be a part of it. So thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Patrick and Wendy.
You get to learn more about me.
We always want to learn more about you.
That sounds awesome.
That does sound awesome.
You get to know my warts about how bad I was at mathematics and persevere.
Are things like this, do we have a place where we can bookmark these as like clean affiliated sort of things? Just because I lose track of these and I don't know how to hold on to them.
Nope.
The answer is no, unfortunately.
Yeah,
it sounds like.
The only thing I was trying to think of was, I mean, people send things out to the email list, and then it's kind of, folks can keep track on their own or whatever. Like I add things to calendars or keep them in my inbox or whatever. But then I was also thinking, like, I mean, it's not a bad idea to try to like create a page within the Clean Network side of things. We have like a page for partners. I don't know if it'd be worth having something like this. The only thing is then somebody would have to keep track of it, and update it.
I like Amy's idea of maybe a Google page that we just link onto the Clean Calls page. That's just like a code-generated document with these types of resources as they come up on the Clean Calls.
That's a better idea.
Well, I mean, Katie, one way to think about it is that, Anna and I need to start thinking about what does Clean Core Mantle look like? And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, is when Clean was taken over by NOAA principally from NSF funding, we talked about, like, you know, that was a large effort. There was a large budget, and then NOAA's amount of money is more like here. We did the core stuff, like the stuff that must keep going. And then we never really articulated what would be here. And even here, if we ever got the luxury of having that, but there, you know, there are needs of the network and the clean portal that are larger than what we can do currently. And I think that there's certain backbone functions that, you know, promotion of everyone's amazing web experiences throughout the network is something that's beyond what we are currently scoped to do. So I think, you know, as we do these moments show up, it would be good for us to kind of capture them, Katie, and just remember, like, oh, right, there's somebody who needs to do this, and it's probably best if Clean was able to do it, but we can't do it with what we have. So we need to find resources to do something that is for the community that is more than what we can currently do. But, you know, we may be, it helps us inform what proposals or what priorities we would go for. So
yeah,
that's the way I see it.
That's a really good point, Frank.
The Google Doc is totally doable, but to keep it
kind of like a stopgap. But I like Amy's comment that it does solve a lot of problems. Like, you can keep a running Google Doc that people can add, you know, add stuff to, and then there's just a list. And that's what it is, but at least it's someplace, like, as opposed to no place.
Yeah, I agree. Can
Other
I
announcements?
Yeah,
jump
in. Awesome.
Sure, thanks, Katie.
So, so actually this is, I think, related, which is nice. We put together, so last spring, we had someone from our team on the Clean Core side of things, on the collection side of things, put together a list of resources that we thought were good from the collection, specifically for people with kids at home, you know, looking for activities to do with kids at home. And so we've taken that page and created actually a virtual teaching sort of page, that we have a page for teachers and then that page for parents and families. And on the resources for teachers page, which I will put that link in here separately, but you can get to on the page I just put in there. It's the big blue button at the top. I've collected some ways that people can search through Clean, some partner resources, and then some webinar series. And I sent an announcement to Clean last week about this as well, but I just thought I'd mention it here. If anybody has any specifically not professional development or learning series for teachers, but things targeted to students this year, we're collecting some of those at the bottom of that resources for teachers page. So these are places that folks can go and just send their students, you know, when teachers need things for kids to do. These are series that they can do that at. So if you have one of those or you know of one, let me know and I'll add it to that list and we'll help advertise those. But also wanted folks to know about this resource that they can point teachers to as well. And we're working on trying to add tags within Clean that can allow for easier searching of remote ready resources. So we're working on that, but right now I just have descriptions of what is in there that's sort of already tagged that way, which is videos and visualizations. So.
Katie, can I ask a quick question while you're on the Clean Resources shares about the elementary page? What's the timing on that one?
It is coming. We are trying to finish it up. We've just had some delay on the CERC side of the site becoming live. And so we are working on it. We're hoping to get it live in the next week, like sending everything out. So the Clean Elementary resources are live in Clean, and the page is getting there. And we're hoping, like I said, that will next week be live, and then we can kind of launch everything together. And it might be the following week before it's all ready, but the resources are live and ready to go within Clean. And we're just working on finalizing the strategies page, which is the teaching, one of the main pages we were working on with you and Rachel, Deb, that you reviewed. And so that will be live, and then we're going to keep working on other support pages and things in the meantime, but it's just this one page. As long as once we can get that up and going in the next week or two, we will launch everything. So.
All right. So can I build on that with an announcement related to our set of resources? So
yes, please. And yeah, I did want to mention the Clean Elementary, but it's not quite there. So I'll have that announcement in like literally next Clean Call or the one after that. So.
This is like a crazy, amazing list of like resources and webinars happening in the chat. Just throwing it out there. You guys are dropping this in here and I'm like, oh my God, trying to bookmark stuff. And speaking of like keeping the list. Sorry, Deb, go ahead.
I can post the chat for this too, by the way.
Yeah, that would be great.
That would be super helpful.
Yeah. So two things related to the resources that Katie just talked about. So one, our Washington State and Oregon, actually, Frank, our Washington State and Oregon State Science Teacher Association meetings are happening in early October. I want to say they're like the 10th or something, somewhere in the weekend area of early October. And we had put in a bunch of different sessions to those around climate science, climate justice, kind of like that collection of topics, and ecological caring, some deeper environmental literacy issues. And they all got accepted and spread across both the Washington and the Oregon meetings so that they could fit it with our team. So our whole team of folks from the lab will be presenting across those. And one of the things, Katie, that we put in is we put in a session that's sort of a mishmash of the one that Frank and I did, and the one with climate generation, and the one that you and Alicia and Anna and I did with Rachel. So a mishmash session that brings together clean resources, some of the climate generation resources for elementary educators. So we're hoping to be able to point to the elementary clean page when it's done, which is great news that it will.
That is awesome. Yeah. When is that conference?
It's the beginning of, I don't have my calendar up right here, but it's the beginning of October.
Okay.
So it looks like we'll be fine. Yeah.
We will. Yeah, we'll have it launched by then for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's October, WSD, 9th and 10th. So so we should be good. And we'll share that back with you just so you know what that looks like as a set of like, here's this. We're going to do it in a similar way that you and I had done one of the clean exploration sessions. So some like working sessions and sharing, but like with little chunks of resource videos, like here's this thing, and then go and explore it. Here's this thing, so that we can have sort of 15-minute videos that we can also share out around.
That's so great. And yeah, I don't know if you probably have to be registered for that for getting the recording, but we can always like, some of the information that comes out of that we can post or something like that. So
yeah, no, we'll definitely pull the videos off as resources. So that's the second piece, is that we're finishing up a bunch of STEM teaching tools that are specifically around climate. And we're starting to push those out. And so those videos will also be embedded in some of the resources that get pushed out in October. So part of our involvement in that is that we can actually produce for ourselves some video resources around that. So we will be able to push those out.
That's great. So yeah, once all that gets launched and live, let's connect in October about sharing links and kind of, mutually, like you said, pointing to each other's resources there. And for folks who I'm not sure how much I've talked about this on here. I think I mentioned it when we were doing the review camps, but just for folks who may not know, we've been working over the last few months about adding resources for elementary teaching into clean, and then a lot of support for teachers around that as well. So that's what Deb and I have, and she's been doing a lot on that side as well for Washington Climb Time work. So it's been great actually to have kind of that mutual discussion and development of this. But yeah, like I said, we will hopefully soon have stuff in clean that I can announce and you can send out to your networks. But just so you know, that's what's going on.
Like it's this intricately woven puzzle of like different pieces of the network trying to like fit everything together. So and that's particularly important, I think, for what Eric was sharing today, because some of those types of professional learning, Eric, that you're talking about, and the different resources that you're producing around that, we definitely want to figure out how to like, and Amy, I know that your work is in this space too. Like we definitely want to like loop those into the STEM teaching tools that we're highlighting so we can point outward, because we don't create everything. We generally just point out to like folks that are doing that work. So we really want to make sure that we're naming those types of examples or efforts that are going on to be able to help people find things.
And that's, kind of the role we hope that the clean can do, like ultimately, I think. I mean, anyway, that's a whole, maybe that's other strategy conversation, but like that idea of, sort of pulling together these amazing resources. I mean, just at like a cursory glance at both what Amy shared and Eric shared, and I've looked at your STEM teaching tools in the past. I mean, like those things are incredible. And it's like, how can you share, like, how can we make sure that the field, multiple fields have access to and know about them, just because they're so great and like, and useful and well done. Go ahead.
Can I just jump in and just say, yeah, I agree. I think that's, to me at least, that's the value of CLEAN, as being sort of that repository for partners or groups and programs and events and things like this that can help to advertise that. But, this is something I mentioned in the leadership board, that we're always trying to talk about and figure out what is the role of CLEAN and such. So if others have different ideas on that, let me know. But I think you hit the nail on the head with like what CLEAN can and does try to do there.
Yeah. Eric, I think I saw your hand go up.
Yeah. Thanks, Deb, for sort of helping to push the word out. And I just wanted to kind of follow up and I'll repost in the chat real quick with a little title about the literacy series that we're working on. But it's exciting because we're sort of, CRS is trying to kind of take it to the next level in terms of, they're very similar. We would point, to opportunities for the most part. But Teresa Barnett, who's the executive director, really wants to do a lot of work with postdocs and grad students and get the real science that they're doing and connecting that to both informal and formal science educators. So what we've done is partnered with a lot of local groups, and they're each leading these workshops. And then even within CRS, now that I'm part of that team, at least in a contract role, I'm doing a workshop as well. So at CRS, it's an original workshop. And the other piece is sort of what I think a lot of the conversation on the last couple times through the CLEAN network, and also some of the, I've talked to Amy a little bit about 10 Strands work and some of the things that Change Scale is doing locally, but this idea of equity and inclusion and the diversification of the environmental and climate kind of movement in space. And so we have Lena Bakshi is going to be the keynote speaker at the resource fair on Saturday, kind of setting the stage for that and contextualizing it within that frame of equity, diversity, and accessibility for different populations, and bringing folks to the table from the beginning, I think is the thought here. And then the other piece obviously is the COVID piece and the digital learning stuff. I mean, that's infused in all of our conversations now and all the ways that we're doing work. So all these workshops will be virtual. They'll all model best practice using different platforms to get folks, teachers, just helping learn from each other about how we do this. Because it's, even with the cure coming, hopefully, in the next year, I think digital learning is not going away. It's an exciting emerging opportunity. And I think there's some really upsides to it in terms of carbon footprints. And as we all know, some of those things. So really excited. And I reposted in the chat with a little tag about the series. If you all, I can follow up, maybe Patrick, and kind of give a little marketing blurb if folks want to push that out to your networks. But it's virtual, so anybody can come, and we'd love. We actually dropped in on one in Louisiana just to do some best practice research to see how they ran their teacher resource fair virtually. So that was fun. But we're sort of looking forward to seeing who does pop in from where. Oh, one last thing I would mention too. I reconnected with Walter Stavalos, who was the former international director of program at Aztec. He's not there anymore, but he's spearheading this sort of website idea. It's almost like creating kind of this gig economy opportunity for people like me that are sort of temporarily out of work, but looking for some temporary opportunities. And the idea is sort of like, you would post, is a speed dating website. It's maybe the best analogy we could come up with. You connect your own experiences and desires and talents with what a museum might be looking for, at least in a temporary basis. So we're trying to figure out the best way to connect the need. And one idea that I think Amy had shared, or at 10 Strands, some of the, was this idea of this outdoor initiative that's emerging, that it's much safer to teach outdoors. There's outdoor spaces at schools. You have informal educators that do a ton of outdoor work that are out of work, bring them into a campus space. My wife's a formal education teacher. Bring an educator into her outdoor area and work together to figure out how to use that outdoor space to leverage it as a teaching area because maybe the teachers don't have quite the same level of expertise as someone that's been doing outdoor education work. So pairing folks, you know, that have the need with maybe the need of the school, plus meeting this sort of COVID, you know, being teaching in safer environments and in safer ways. So once there's more there, I'll share that out in future weeks.
That's awesome,
if
Eric. I know. Oh, go ahead, Jim.
No, sorry. If I might, with Eric, I'm looking at the resources that you just posted. I think it's good even to kind of note for Katie and for Amy in particular. But I think others would be there. One of them is going to be climate change concepts for K5 in September, which is great. I mean, that, as we know, that's, let's just say it's a question of how that gets handled. I think, you know, Clean is on board that we need K-12 resources. We need elementary. When I've talked to the administrator at the Oakland Unified School District, and this is one of it, they had just come off of the California, formerly the Science Teachers Association, now it's called something CASE, where it was that, no, we're not going to teach anything about climate in elementary school, you know, and that was what she was telling their staff. But as this addresses, yes, NGSS doesn't specifically use the words climate change until middle school. There's plenty of introductory information that if students don't get it, they're not going to be set up for climate change when it comes in. And I'm glad to see that you all are being proactive on that. And I think that'd be very positive. We want to be positive. It's not about tearing each other down. But the idea that we can't bring this up in elementary school doesn't work scientifically, in my opinion. So great.
Yeah,
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks very much, James, for saying that. Sorry, I just like, you know, inside the Washington state system, the K-12 work that we've been doing here, like we just have to frame what we're doing in the K-5 space about elementary climate science education and think developmentally about like what does action sort of education or solutions oriented education mean in that context, so that we don't hit despair or like the robbing of agency of youth. And so like absolutely there's so many core things. We could have K-5 elementary students who have way better understanding of like where carbon comes from in plants and how to mitigate it if we do K-5 right, you know.
So Jim, just want to build on that last point. Especially what you said, Deb, about because the learning pathway concept that's in NGSS and NRC framework is robust, but it somehow seems like if you don't use this word, then you're not doing it. And it's like, well, we don't do anything on climate change until middle school because the word's there. But before that, that's not at all because we're not using that word. I'm like, well, there's this other stuff called the atmosphere or carbon cycle or, you know, that are totally foundational. So when we did the NGSS tagging architecture for Clean, the collection, we did a comprehensive analysis of all of the NRC framework, and we had, you know, all the way down to kindergarten. We articulated which standards relate to climate and climate change. It's not well understood that pathway. So I think, you know, articulating that is one thing, but there was a conversation I was having with a partner recently, and it's very easy for a concept to introduce the problem, and then somebody else will teach the solution side of that in another class that maybe they take 2 years later, and that is wrong. And so, you know, there's some uniquenesses about climate change that you would want to do both a full articulation and then pedagogically, how do you match things in time and space for learners on this topic that is really, really important. Because, you know, it's not like, well, somebody else takes care of that over there. And it's like, no, that doesn't work because of the divorce in time between problem and solution, just to keep it simple. So I think we have there's definitely work we have to do as a community to clarify how learning on climate change works and within the architectures that we are working within that do right by our students, full stop. So, but, you know, I don't know how we do that. I mean, the community rose up and created the climate literacy guide in 2006, 7, 8, 9, but that's, you know, we've gone well beyond that. So there's something else that's needed. I don't know what it is, but, you know, when you're dealing with people who this isn't their whole job, they get lost really fast. And I don't think at the end of the day, we're doing right by our students yet.
may I speak in agreement with Frank and also kind of go positive with that, is a technique that Eric going on for a second, but when we were selecting what parts of climate science to emphasize, to make a subject that went on, one of the things that said, let's go with this one, and we'll, not so emphasize this, and we would take NASA and NOAA science and say, what are things that when we teach this science and give the kids the tools for this, it can be immediately flipped over and used as a solution too, right? That you're by getting the science about the problem, you're actually being introduced to a tool that you can use in a fun, you can be engaged in community change, like how it can be used in energy conservation or things like that, so that you're kind of getting a 2-for-1 out of it, and immediately always linking, here's a problem that has solutions, and the solutions are fun and exciting. I mean, I know that isn't always everybody's thing, but, finding that, and fortunately, and thanks a lot with the way NOAA frames things, it's not hard to do that. There's a lot of stuff that just goes right over to the solutions. Thanks.
Maybe kind of piggybacking on what Frank and Deb and Jim are mentioning too, like we did this project, you can all see it. It's integrating climate science into 4th and 5th grade curriculum back in around 2010 and 11. It was more foundation funded, but it was also NASA funded. And the idea was to do exactly what Frank was mentioning, to find opportunity to integrate, especially K-5, because again, with NGSS, and this is prior NGSS too, so, but very much found those links. So we would use, at that time, we were working with a lot of Oakland teachers and they had adopted the old FOSS curriculum. So we found the entry points, the carbon cycle, the atmosphere, like Frank mentioned, and then we would scaffold on the climate literacy piece, and just create a really, when we got at the very end of the project, it was really nice because you weren't asking more of the teachers, because that's the huge thing is you're overlaying more burden on the teachers and they don't see that seamless way to connect the dots. It just becomes really difficult because, and then with COVID, right, it's even tougher. And then this one, I think you probably all are familiar with, Laura Tucker and Lois Sherwood. I spoke with Laura a couple of weeks ago. And what I really like about this curriculum, it's NSTA, I guess, backed, but it's very interdisciplinary. So it's not just science. And I think there was some good conversation in past weeks around this idea that climate change, to do, Deb, kind of what you're mentioning, to do it right and to get kids to be action oriented, you got to bring in social science, you got to bring in science communication, all of those pieces, because that empowers them. And then the last thing that I've been hearing a lot of young people say, and just in conversations with older folks too, they want half of the conversation to be around solutions, and from the get-go, because, like when I did this was interesting doing the climate reality training, it took till like day 5 or 6 of the training for Al Gore to actually start talking about solutions. And he even prefaced it by saying, we're going to talk solutions. Don't worry, it's coming. But it was like 3 days in, and it didn't bother me because we've all heard those presentations and we all know the severity of it. And, we're navigating that ourselves. But young people from the get-go, to give them that agency and sense of, I can do this, they need that like up front or infused, as you're all mentioning, as part of the conversation, like almost seamlessly, like Jim, what you're saying, you have the problem, but you've got the solution right there. So maybe it's not even waiting, it's just integration from the get-go, and really trying to get our youth, I have watched too many gloom and doom science fiction, and read too many books around this dark future. We don't paint the bright future enough and allow youth to be part of that process of painting the bright picture. So I think if we, there's the real things that are happening that you have to be real, but there's built-in change in the pipeline now with lag times that we know are coming. And, this is the tip of the iceberg with California, with these crazy temperatures. And so we know that that's true. And yet, because we know it's true, we build to that and we build on that. And we say in 2040, maybe we can turn the curve. Maybe we can, so it's challenging, but we have to do our best as stewards for this and passing the torch to the young people, to not just get them to shut down and say, well, I don't, what do I do?
That's a great segue. But Tiffany, do you want to go? And then I'll go after you.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on what Eric said really quick. And I think a lot of times, because I'm a trained educator, people haven't been brought up in kind of the phenomenon first. And now that we're shifting more to that, the pedagogy for teachers is matching that agency of students a lot more, because you need to look at what people are going to do about it. And then it's fine to back into the why and to back into the science. But I think, you know, the phenomenons are all around us with fires and everything that's going on. And I think that entry point for students is really important. And like you said, Al Gore got to it on day 3, but students are ready on day 1.
Yeah. So that is a good segue, because I did want to mention the climate summit work that's been happening. So a couple things. One is that, and I'm going to put it in the chat, and I think I've mentioned it here before, but in the clean space before, but the Bay Area Youth Climate Summit is happening on Saturday. It's a virtual summit. I think anybody can sign up for it still. And it's like, again, if you take a look at their awesome website, they've got a great Instagram feed too. It's run almost entirely by students. Like, there's kind of like nary an adult insight on this. And what's cool about this is that the students that were organizing it, and we've been, the Wild Center team has been kind of mentoring them, like, you know, in the background on it, and just kind of helping, not really, I don't want to say mentoring, but coaching and like helping to support the work that they're doing. And so my team is presenting on Saturday, is helping them think about, again, the solutions first stuff. But they actually attended another youth summit in May that was organized by a team of kids, almost all young people in the Bronx. And they were like, oh, hey, we can do this. And so they just like pulled this event together over the summer. And they all have their little profiles on there, and like, it's awesome. So I would highly encourage you to check that out. We are also going to be launching our own sort of reworking of our summit concept. So typically we have this like 2-day huge event. Everybody comes in person in the fall, in November, and we're not doing that obviously this year. Pulling together large groups of high school students and putting them into small spaces is not really on the list of things to do. So pretty much we are also going all virtual. We're going to be launching a series of talks, online presentations, challenges and opportunities for student meetups starting at the end of this month. Our first speaker is going to be Elizabeth Bagley from Project Drawdown, because we want to lead with that solutions first framing, because that's what we're hearing from all our students is like, enough with the doom and gloom already. Like, we need something hopeful. Like, they are desperate for something hopeful. And like, what we're really looking at as we're framing this out, so each month we're going to have a really great high level speaker. We also have I can't remember his name. He spoke at the I'm blanking here for a second. He spoke at our Teacher Institute. He's from the Clio Institute in Florida.
Oh yeah,
John, climate justice guy. Deb, you know who I'm talking about. He's awesome. He's also presenting. So those guys, so Elizabeth and John, they're going to present first, and then we're going to also do like student meetups. It's going to be open to anybody across the country. We're also modeling out regional meetups for students. So if you have a group in Colorado or a group in California or whatever, like, we can make sure, and all this, as soon as we're ready with all the branding and everything else, it will be going out. We're kind of on a last minute, we're a little behind, but it's all coming hopefully later this week to get this launched. And then we'll also have, so then we'll have a student challenge on the weekend that's more about like citizen science, like getting outside, like doing something. And then we're also going to do what we're calling Unwind Climate Time, which is like a student meetup. It's going to be mostly student led. It might be trivia. It might be some art project. It's just like, it's really about supporting student well-being and health and having a place where they can connect online. So focusing on that social and emotional well-being is another thing that we've been hearing over and over and over again. And I loved seeing that. I think, Amy, you have on your webinar series, there's like a social emotional learning piece, which I'm really interested in. So those are like, so every month for the next 4 months, we're going to be doing that. High level speakers, opportunities for student and teacher meetups, opportunities for cohort work in your own spaces, the climate time, the weekend challenges, and then the Unwind Climate Time. So it's going to be like a series every month. And then eventually I think we're going to do some sort of like, if you do X number, you're going to get a certificate or something like that. So it's kind of like a summit, and you can get some kind of like something in the end. So that's kind of where we're at. You can still see it's slightly half-baked, but we're building the plane and flying the plane these days. So that's kind of cool. The other thing I wanted to announce is that we've been working, I think maybe most of you know this, but we've been working with the New York State Office of Climate Change over the last year-ish on the certification program called Climate Smart Communities. And we've had a couple of communities, Saranac Lake, which is where I live, and then also the small town of Homer, New York, which is down outside of Syracuse, where students have actually initiated and have been leading the climate smart community efforts and helping the villages, like with, doing greenhouse gas inventories, like doing social media for the villages, convening meetings, like high school students are leading all this. Well, those two communities are actually getting bronze level certification. And there's going to be a huge announcement, like big New York State announcement thing during Climate Week, which is the week of September 21st. So we're really excited about that because it feels very hopeful. Like, the students worked really hard on this, and it's like going to be some major recognition. We're hoping the governor picks it up, and there's a chance that might happen. So we're working on that. But it'll definitely at least be coming from the State Office of Climate Change. So those are my two announcements. Sorry, I was a little long-winded.
Jen, for Saturday, a lot of what's going on with that summit is from Lick Wilmerding, which is now a private school. It used to be a public school in San Francisco. It's a fantastic school. I mean, it can really do a lot. My next door neighbor goes there, and my brother went there, and it's a school where I think we can see some very great things happen. So you're connecting with some really great people.
That's great. I didn't know that, but I mean, I didn't know. It's nice to hear. Like, I thought maybe some of you in California might know the school or the students or
that school in particular stands out. So that's really good.
Yeah. Gen Z is like really making it happen. So most of I don't know of any summits that are happening like in person. Everything is moving virtual, and actually there's some silver linings in that. Like, students can participate from anywhere in the country. All these events are looking really different. I think the one thing we're still puzzling through right now is, what does action look like? So one of the big pieces of all the summits has always been that youth they come together, they create an action plan, they bring it back to their schools or back to their communities or both. And how do I think we're trying to figure out now, like, what does that really look like when students aren't literally, I know at least here, they're not even allowed to move around the school. Like, they're in their little pods, and they if they are in school at all. So, or out in the community to meetings and those sorts of things where where relationship building is a little bit easier than it is maybe in the online forum. So that's something we're puzzling over, and of course would always welcome any input on that. I know the Bay Area Summit, they do have some climate action solution stuff happening, and it'll be really interesting to see how that actually manifests and works. Because usually those actions, like the climate smart communities, that's a really high level action from schools that have been involved with us for a long time, and the students are they know their stuff, and they can really communicate that, and they know what they're doing. Most of the time the actions are, they work on maybe school solar powered recharging stations, or school gardens, or a community event where they bring their parents and talk about climate change. So it's those types of things that typically students are running. So we're still trying to feel out what actually is gonna work in a COVID non-gathering, in a socially appropriately gathered way, whatever that looks like, or on Zoom, which people are kind of tired of by 7 o'clock at night. So they don't want to go to an evening virtual event, maybe.
Jen, what was the name of the organization? I think they're out of Minnesota that I think Climate Generation just took over.
I Matter.
I Matter, that's it, thank you. That's the one I was looking for. Because one of the things I liked about the I Matter approach was that they intentionally looked at a community's climate actions and gave them their youth perspective on their actions. That instead of doing my actions, I'm looking at your actions, the collective actions. And I always appreciate that I Matter model. I thought that was an important. It's different than your model, but I thought it was important.
We actually started with iMatter, and it didn't actually work for us great. It just didn't work with the current cohort of students that we had, because it ended up being less of a dialogue and more like a report card back to the board, the village board. And the village board was like, "Oh, what do you mean we failed?" Like, because they failed horribly, like they like horribly. And they did not appreciate getting called out on all that stuff. Like, and it sort of created a roadblock as opposed to creating an opening for a conversation, which we were really trying. So I think that there is, I also really appreciate the iMatter approach. But I think that for us, what that learning there was that what we wanted to do is open doors, not shut them. We wanted to be the analysis to be like a group, like a team effort, as opposed to like students just saying like, this is great, this is not great. Like, we wanted it to be more intergenerational, I guess, and to create the dialogues and to give students agency and help adults learn that students can be great resources and allies and like accomplices in this work, like that they can actually do that together, as opposed to like, does that make sense?
Absolutely. But I mean, one of the things that's interesting, sorry, I'll stop, is the work that happened in Homer, New York, where the youth were working with the city to lead the climate smart community task force, where they're doing it together. It's just a different model of where you're coming together to look at what can we do together based on what we've already said we're going to do, as opposed to, you guys didn't do a very good job and here's where.
Right.
But I think
that there's a merging there that could happen. Like, you can still do an analysis, like you can still look at a community and like figure out like what's working, what's not working, but it's like figuring that out together, and the approach around it and the communication around it, it just wasn't quite what we wanted. But the climate smart community piece like changed everything, because now the community is going to get all this recognition. They're going to hold a press event, the governor might show up, like there's a whole thing that might happen, and that's because students like made that happen, and it made that certification possible.
Absolutely.
There's work in this space that's really, it's in the justice space. It wasn't necessarily in climate, though some of the original work by Megan Bang was in climate related or environmental literacy spaces. But like, this is the way that we're moving. And if people aren't moving this way, it's where we're getting a lot of rub and like pushback on justice fronts, especially about collaborative designing. Because what you're talking about, both of you, I think, is that collaborative voice, not just like voice for voice sake, but voice for agency. And like, so how is it that we actually really honestly, authentically work together?
Thanks, Katie. Oh, there, she's gone. Yeah,
that was fast.
That was fast.
Gotta go to another meeting. Bye.
We have just a minute left. Are there any other final announcements or thoughts or anything? We talked about lots of stuff, lots of good things happening. That's very hopeful.
Well, one quick one is, so the USA strategy, we're moving into our next phase. We sent out the newsletter from the portal over the weekend, finally. I figured out how to do that. But the key next step for the community is, we think October 21st, 22nd, somewhere in that range, we'll be hosting an event, the 6th event, where we will be talking about what happened and walking people through the framework that resulted. Deb is on the writing team on this, so I'm looking at a bunch of people who are on the coordinating team, so we're not done yet. But we'll launch the community review for everyone to give us feedback on really what happened as a result of this, and hopefully at the end of that feedback, we'll go into the final version of the framework, which will be launched for the community in a public way around November 30th. That's our current timeline. So the next wave, there's a lot of things between now and October 21st, 22nd, But you know, from a clean perspective, the community would have an opportunity to really dive into the resulting framework around October 21st, and then, you know, have about 2 weeks to give us the feedback, and then we'll have to take it all in. Hopefully it's substantive, and because that will mean we'll have you know, improvements, and then we'll come back to that. And I'm going to put the link to the website. Where did that go? I just had that. Here you go. So just for continuity's sake, and boom, all that information will be on that website. All right.
Thanks, Frank.
And a couple very quick things. Jen, there's some interesting things going on with the video platforms in big youth events. So if you want to talk more about that as a possible way to create gathering spaces, I think it's got some potential that's really emerged in the last 6 months through COVID.
Sorry,
and,
which platform did you say?
Different video game platforms like Fortnite and hosting these huge concerts that are live with the performers there. And it's just it's a new mode of engagement that I think is
I know my nephew's obsessed with Fortnite.
That's what I'm saying.
I know the whole gaming thing. I don't get it, but I know I'm not Gen Z, so I don't need to, but maybe I need to understand it a little better.
Could be a useful youth gathering space. And Frank Neapol,
an interesting idea.
A few minutes, I'd love to just check with you on the schedule for the next Clean ACE listening. Cool.
Yep.
Great. Well, thanks everybody. It's nice to see everyone's faces, and you know, stay safe out there, like especially out west, man. You guys, like, I'm sorry, and stay safe, and I hope your families and loved ones are safe.
Wendy, give me 5 more minutes, and I got to talk to Patrick, and then call me. Talk to you, Wendy.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.